You may not have noticed it, but the Broncos actually got some great news earlier this week that we're going to share on today's episode. But quick plug here, we're going to have a watch party for the Broncos Colts upcoming preseason game this Sunday, so come hang out with us 30 minutes before kickoff. And if you are ready to watch some Broncos football, make sure to hit that thumbs up button down below to start today's video. But let's get into the good news that Sean Payton and the Broncos received going into their first preseason game, which is former fourth-round draft pick out of Iowa State defensive tackle Eyioma Uwazurike was reinstated by the NFL after serving a year-long indefinite suspension due to gambling. Now, this might not feel like a big win for the Broncos, but I'll push back and say this quietly is some really good news for Sean Payton and company because this is a unit that needs as much help as it can get. The Broncos defensive line, let's not kid ourselves, was not some top 10 unit last year. They were awful against the run. So picking up a 26-year-old defensive tackle, sure, a little bit older for someone that entered the league in 2022, but I'm excited to see him back on the field after missing him all of last year, which I think it's safe to say the Broncos missed his services last year because it couldn't have really been any worse than it was in 2023. Do not disregard this news as, oh, this is just some minor roster camp body. No, I think Uwazurike is going to have a really good chance to make the 53-man roster. I hope he's been staying in as tip-top shape as possible during his year-long suspension. I'm not quite sure if we're going to see him in that preseason game against the Colts, but I am confident that we're going to see him at some point in the preseason. And this Broncos defensive line can get as much depth and reinforcements as possible. Now, when he played in his rookie year, only 8 games, 17 tackles, 1 pass breakup. But I remember Uwazurike coming out of Iowa State as an extremely versatile defensive lineman. Sometimes colleges have a habit of putting defensive linemen in a spot that's most beneficial for them. I know, how dare they? And not necessarily where they will land in the NFL. But when you look at Denver's defensive line, like we know what Zach Allen's capable of, John Franklin Myers is going to be a really good pass rusher. Hopefully DJ Jones can kind of bounce back a little bit this year and shore up the run. But if you're looking for a versatile down lineman on first and second down that can hop around on obvious run situations while also contributing in the pass rush department, I mean, this is going to be a pass rush by committee approach anyway, so the more cooks in the kitchen, the better, actually, in this instance. So I think Uwazurike, if he was able to stay in good shape and has been competitive in training camp and worthy of a roster spot, is going to be more than just some guy that's the 53rd player on the roster. I think he's got a really good chance of being a rotational member of that defensive line, which I don't think has enough superstar talent to ask those players to play 70% of snaps, an outrageous number like that for an interior defensive lineman. So if you're going to have a healthy rotation where no guy plays more than 55% of snaps outside of Zach Allen, I would say, you're going to need some quality backups. And Uwazurike, I think, could have served that role a lot better than some other players did last year. Now, here's what Sean Payton had to say on Uwazurike getting his suspension lifted by the National Football League. And he has handled this well. He took full responsibility for it. We're in that period of time where there's a lot of mistakes being made relative to the gambling and the gambling policy. I think the league and the communication they provided him with, we're grateful for. Let's just kind of address the elephant in the room, which is, why was Uwazurike suspended in the first place? Well, he was allegedly gambling on the Broncos and on Iowa State back when he was in Ames and playing in college. It's dumb. Like, I'm not going to try and excuse that. It's a bad mistake, but I think it's worth forgiving, right? It's a victimless crime. I don't think Uwazurike was out there gambling against the Broncos. I don't think he was taking the under on the tackles. It's not like they had player props for backup defensive tackles. I think he was probably a little bit confused as to what he could and couldn't do, or he probably knew what he couldn't do but had someone back home put all the bets in on their account, and he thought he wouldn't get tied to it, and he was clever than the FBI or whatever, and ultimately that didn't happen. But I think this is something worth forgiving. So I'm not going to hold that against Uwazurike for the rest of his career. He served his time. Missing a full year in the second year of your NFL career is a huge thing to put up against someone. So I think that is enough punishment that we don't need to harp on it any further. I'm excited for him to come back on the field. Now, before we look at that Broncos-Colts preseason game, I want to address something that has kind of taken over sports radio and just the sports, universe in Denver. USA-Serbia, semifinal basketball game on Thursday. Who are you rooting for? Team USA or Team Jokic and then some Serbians on the side? I was pulling for Team USA, and I know that there are a lot of Nuggets fans that were pulling for Jokic, and there were a lot of players on Team USA that Nuggets fans don't like, but to me, this is one of those instances where all of a sudden you transform from being like a KD or LeBron hater to God bless the US of A and God bless those guys being on our squad. So I was pulling for Team USA from the start to the end, no question and no doubt in my mind about it. But be honest in the comment section. Who did you want to win that game? All right, let's talk about preseason week 1 for the second half of today's video. So a couple of storylines I want to put on your radar. The most obvious one, of course, but I would not be doing my job if I did not acknowledge it, the quarterback battle. And we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on that in just a moment. But today's show is sponsored by Game Time. If you love summer baseball and want to catch a Rockies game before the season is over, or a Broncos preseason game, or any other sporting event in your area, download the Game Time app today and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. Now, what I love about Game Time is they offer the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, concerts, or any other sporting event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code CHAT Sports for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So let's talk about the Broncos quarterback battle going into preseason week 1. Denver released their unofficial depth chart, which had Jarrett Stidham at 1, Zach Wilson at 2, Bo Nix at 3. There is absolutely no cause for concern that Bo Nix is QB3. One, coaches hate doing these preseason depth charts. The NFL forces each team to release one. And more often than not, I think they just give it to some intern and say, put all the rookies at the bottom of the totem pole and then put everyone else in ascending order of how many snaps they had last year and how many years they have been in the league. But going into this preseason game, I think every single snap is crucial. 3 preseason games. My gut tells me that the Broncos will, gut/wishful thinking, announce their starting quarterback, or at least internally know it, going into preseason week 3. At which point they can make one of 2 decisions. Play that starter and increase the amount of snaps to get them ready for the regular season, or sit that starter completely so they do not get injured for the regular season. We can debate about which path is better, but I hope going into preseason week 3, at that stage, they know who their starter is, which means this week and next week against the Packers are your 2 opportunities to really showcase what you're capable of against an opposing defense and not in practice where, if you throw a bad pass, restart the drill, let's give it another go. No, this is the preseason, which for a lot of guys is inconsequential, but when you have a quarterback battle going on, every single pass, snap, handoff, rep is magnified, and I'm excited to watch it. Now, who do you think will be the week 1 starter? Jarrett Stidham or Bo Nix? I've gone back and forth, but I'm still kind of leaning towards Jarrett Stidham, and I think Bo Nix will be the starter very soon, but I'm not sold on him taking over that starting gig as soon as week 1. It may happen at halftime of week 2 or week 3. It's going to happen likely at some point in September, but I'm leaning towards Jarrett Stidham. If what Denver said about they want to get the best quarterback possible to win week 1 on the field and not just starting the rookie just for the sake of starting the rookie, I think that goes in favor of Jarrett Stidham. CB2 is the next cornerback battle to watch for during this preseason matchup. Damarri Mathis against Riley Moss. Now, the veteran Levi Wallace, who was signed in the offseason, has been dealing with, I think, a hamstring injury. We have not seen him for a good amount of time, but on the initial depth chart, it was Pat Surtain, Jaquan McMillan starting, no surprise. And then the classic college football, Damarri Mathis or Riley Moss. This one kind of always gets under my skin a little bit. Just pick someone. I know it's meaningless, but at least pick one name, and then you can change it after a week if you don't like how that one player performed. But Damarri Mathis is not going to inspire a ton of confidence into Broncos country. Maybe he bounces back after a really strong offseason and turns things around, but the last time we really saw him in a starting role, it was a disaster. Was it not? I mean, it was the first 4 weeks of one of the worst starts to an NFL regular season by any defense in the history of the National Football League. So there's Damarri Mathis on one side, and then there's Riley Moss, who was a third-round draft pick 2 years ago out of Iowa. He missed all of training camp his rookie year due to a sports hernia injury. We hardly saw him in the regular season, which was a little bit concerning because they benched Damarri Mathis after, I think the Chiefs game, was it? Week 5. And they went to Fabian Moreau, the veteran. And it made you wonder, man, if Mathis is one of the worst corners in football by PFF's grading scale, and they're not even looking at the third-round draft pick from this year, like how bad is he in practice? But from a lot of reports, Riley Moss has looked really good so far in training camp. So I want the best possible corner to start for this team. And after watching Damarri Mathis last year, I'm inclined to believe that it can't get much worse than that. So I'm leaning towards Riley Moss just because we know what the floor is like with Mathis, and it was 70 points against the Dolphins last year. Third thing to watch for in Indianapolis, the center rotation. These two battles are a little bit more sexier, but the center rotation one I think is going to be where you find the diehards of Broncos country. So the initial depth chart had Luke Wattenberg starting at center, followed by Alex Forsythe, the 7th-round pick last year out of Oregon, Bo Nix's old center, and then veteran Sam Mustipher. I think we're going to see a healthy rotation of these three centers. I don't think we're going to see each one get a run with the first-team offense, but I think it's going to be a lot more hands-on for this center group than maybe some other position groups. So keep an eye on it as people rotate in and out. Hopefully, Wattenberg or Forsythe can emerge as the clear and obvious starter because that's what's likely best for this team long-term, having a young guy on a rookie deal really run away with the position and join what I think is a top 10 offensive line with Bowles, who played out of his mind last year, coming off a broken leg. Mike McGlinchey, if his worst play is still mediocre, I'll take that. Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber guard Quinn Miners, and then an above-average guard in Ben Powers. The center is the only squeaky wheel on this offensive line, and if they put some oil on it, it's going to be a really good unit this year. Fourth thing to keep an eye on, some rookie debuts. I mean, this is our real first opportunity to see the 2024 Broncos draft class. And, of course, all eyes are going to be on Bo Nix. That's what every headline is going to be about, and rightfully so. It's the quarterback position. We don't need to kid ourselves or overthink it, but there's some other guys that I'm excited to see, right? I'll remind everyone of who Denver selected back in April. But Jonah Ellis, 3rd-round pick out of Utah. Troy Franklin, a wide receiver that fell into day 3 of the draft that surprised a lot of people. Sean Payton and company moved up for him. 5th-round corner Chris Abrams-Drain. I think he's going to be the backup for Jaquan McMillan. Running back Audric Estime, definitely keep an eye on him. 7th-round picks Devon Vele and Nick Grugo, the offensive lineman from South Carolina. From what I've gathered so far at training camp, and this is just what the eyes and ears around the facility have said, Caden Ellis has looked really sharp so far during training camp. I could also swap that out with running back Audric Estime. But wide receiver Troy Franklin's kind of had some rookier moments so far, which, hey, that's to be expected. They're rookies. We shouldn't hold a couple of bad practices or mistakes against them out of the gate. But this is just a rough idea as to whose stock is maybe going up into this preseason game versus, hey, who's not looking maybe like the sharpest tool in the shed and could, really benefit from a nice outing like Troy Franklin. Final thing I'm keeping an eye on, I want to find out who this year's Jaleel McLaughlin is. Last year going into the preseason, I remember doing videos about the UDFAs and saying this one guy from Youngstown State, he holds like the NCAA rushing record. I think he's a sleeper to make this roster. And not only did highlight reel Jaleel make the roster, he was very beneficial and a big explosive playmaker for that offense last season. So who's my highlight reel Jaleel for this preseason that's going to capture Broncos country's hearts? I'll go with 7th-round draft pick Devon Vele. Now, he's got a huge frame, 6'5", 210, and he took full advantage of that at Utah. He's on the older side, which is why he fell so far in the draft. He served an LDS mission, so he did not go straight from high school to college. He's 25, maybe 26 years old, but I mean, he's been lighting it up so far in training camp. So if you want to sound smart in front of your friends and not just come into the party with, I think Bo Nix is supposed to be good this year, toss out the name Devon Vele. You're going to get some necks turning, but ultimately, I think you're going to be proven right throughout the course of the game. All right, time for our summer hot takes today. After a really hot week last week, it has cooled down at the Mile High City. We're looking at a 74-degree high for today, so a honey barbecue hot take. Today's honey barbecue hot take is Baron Browning will lead the Broncos in sacks with 9. It's not supposed to be a hot take because it's honey barbecue hot take, but I think Baron Browning, of the top 3 pass rushers on this team, Browning, Cooper, and Benito, and kind of tossing Zach Allen if you want to, I think Browning is the best when he's healthy, and he missed the start of last year, but if he stays healthy for all 17 games this year, I think he can get up to 9 sacks going into a contract year, and that will be good enough to lead the team.